Broadcasting from the Bryant neighborhood on the historic Black South Side of Minneapolis. Welcome to People Power.
Welcome to People Power, speaking truth to power by bringing you voices from the grassroots. My name is Merjan. Thank you for joining me for this special episode number 6. I have reactions from activists at George Floyd Square on the guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin for murdering Floyd. Today I'll close the show with some updates this time. It was a festive scene with a lot of mixed emotions. There were a couple of incidents. I ran into a lot of folks up there last Tuesday after the verdict was announced. I saw Jelani Cobb from The New Yorker, Tom Lydon from Fox 9 News, a right-wing cop-loving asshole. He's notorious for racist reporting on protests. I'll play my whole encounter with him soon. I think I need a whole episode to dedicate to him. There was a notorious slumlord at George Floyd Square last Tuesday after the verdict was announced, named Basim Sabri. I got more on him in a bit. Check out my latest piece on Unicorn Riot. The state's conviction of Chauvin upholds the system's innocence. The mainstream press failed to put the trial in the proper context, that a guilty verdict meant the system works fine. The state said Derek Chauvin is on trial, not MPD. And it was actually the defense, Derek Chauvin's attorney, that was trying to put the system on trial. So a not guilty verdict in this case would have meant that the system is fucked up. Derek Chauvin's actions were perfectly fine within that fucked up system. And I gotta admit, everybody was surprised that he was found guilty on all 3 charges. I know I was. I didn't expect it, but then again, the state made a great case that Derek Chauvin was an outlier and the system was working well.
Although every black person knows that the system itself is guilty, Derek Chauvin's behavior was not an aberration.
I talked to some folks, and Nico from Unicorn Riot also talked to some folks at George Floyd Square that shared those same feelings. I ran into an old friend and activist, Kai Anderson, a.k.a. Kai Swivel, at George Floyd Square last Tuesday, and here's what he shared with me about his feelings now that Chauvin has been convicted.
Well, one, I don't feel any satisfaction. I feel a lot of pain. I think people have a right to feel some kind of relief. We have a long ways to go. I still feel a deep amount of sadness for people like Breonna Taylor. And others who have been victims of police brutality that are getting justice, but it is good that we're out here with the people and that we keep on fighting and making sure we keep centered in our balanced approach to all this, that we don't get too overjoyed. We also aren't down about this because this is a win. I think the verdict, what happened should have happened, but it was a year of hell to get here, and that's bullshit that we had to wait this long and go through all this just for this to happen.
Just for something to happen that should have happened, right? That's the shit that right there I think is gonna stick with all black people out here, man. Like, just to get simple justice, it took all of this. A year of hell, Kai Swivel said.
And you know, we thought 2020 was bad, but 2021 is when the real battle takes shape. Here in the community, we should expect a violent raid at George Floyd Square any day. by the politicians and Chief Rondo of the Minneapolis Police Department, while they still have the military in town to back them up. The homie Nico did a really good interview with Mylisha, who is one of the volunteers at George Floyd's Square, one of the gatekeepers, really. She's been holding it down with, a handful of other folks up there.
It doesn't bring George Floyd back. And it doesn't. What does this change? It changes a lot, but the military is here. All this is happening. Look at what's happening. Look at where we're living right now. Look at what we're experiencing in life right now. I'm not okay. I'm not happy at all. Everybody's happy about this verdict, but I can't say that I'm happy, if that makes sense. I want to be happy. I do. But like I was just telling people, this is not even the end of this war. It's not even the end of this war that we're fighting. So, because now that the verdict is here, we can finally get to business. Now we can talk about why this square is here. Now we can really get down to business, and that is a scary space.
And right as Mylisha is starting to break it down, she's talking about her anxiety and the anxiety of many folks in the community now that the trial is over, about the violent raid that's going to be coming to reopen the streets.
Everything that I said has been, those people have heard it, but now it's publicly being said, and now it puts me in the space, like, really, because now we keep on saying, it was never about the police, it was never about the police, it's about the system itself. So now that we're saying that, now that the verdict is here, they're thinking that, we're supposed to just give them the streets back and all that other good stuff, and
Don't work like that.
It doesn't work like that. I really wish I could go back to normal life. I remember you, love.
And just as the conversation's really getting deep, Mylisha's interrupted by Basim Sabri, who's a slumlord. This man is a straight gangster. He's been to prison for corruption. He owns tons of properties in the central community around Lake Street. And he interrupted her right as she's talking about the battle for these streets and the push to reopen them.
I just want to ask you 30-second question.
What's that, love?
Because he got killed over $20 bill. I got a bunch of 20 that I want to throw up in the air. Got a bunch of 20 that I want to throw up in the air. Got a bunch of 20 that I want to throw up in the air. Just in memory of his life. Can I do that?
Let me get one first before you throw it. Okay.
But
No, go ahead.
I just don't want to be disrespectful.
Here, come on. Here, come on. He wants to do something. Go ahead.
Okay.
Because you saying it's over $20, you got more than $20 to give. All this was over $20, and you say you want to give more than $20. Right?
You know that Floyd.
So the slumlord Sabri, he's related to the people who own Cup Foods, right? They're all family. They all own all this property in the community, extracting wealth from black people, from poor people. Instead of having a sack of $20 bills, he had a sack of $1 bills, right? So he threw them up in the air to prove a point. Not just to see people crawl on the ground and pick up $1 bills, but he wanted to interrupt one of the volunteers who represents George Floyd Square live on air to prove his point that he can make people react and move for money. And he proved his point.
I just want to tell you that I love you. I know Floyd very well.
Live on air.
For years. He's a wonderful man.
He had the nerve to mention he knew George Floyd as if they were friends, but he failed to mention if he knew Derek Chauvin, right? Sabri employs many police officers. Those scumbags are his private paramilitary, just like these other developers. So
When we talk about people who are responsible for the murder of George Floyd, you better believe Sabri and the family that own Cup Foods, they're responsible.
You're just a part of the community.
40 years.
Yes, yes.
So I just want to give away some money today. That's my giveaway. And
Your offering, you can take an offering.
Of course, this is no coincidence. He owns much property in the community. He wants to see the streets open. And check out what he did. It was super disrespectful. And he tricked Alicia and some of the folks there into this nonsense. And I got a call the next day from an activist, a sister. She was real upset. Southside tenants' right activist Karina Bowler. Here's what she had to say.
So after the verdict, as I mentioned, I felt very emotional. I was exhausted. I was very afraid of what the outcome could have been. And being in the space of George Floyd Square, it brought tears to my eyes because our youth are suffering. We have people sleeping on the streets. We have families being pushed out of their communities because of gentrification. And we have people profiting off of our circumstances. And we have people who don't live in our communities or from the state poverty pimping our people. And I witnessed a video from Unicorn Riot where I saw a guy come in the square and kind of, slap the Black community in the face. And that's how I felt. That was my opinion. I was exhausted. I was emotional. And I looked at it as if he was slapping the Black community in the face and said that all we deserve was $20 on the death of an assassination of a Black man.
What did you see on that video? What did he do?
He walked up and he had a bag of money and he talked to an individual and it just went money in the air. It was raining money. And I saw every single dollar that poured from that bag. I saw blood money. I saw the Black community need the resources. I saw that no one puts resources in our community. And I just saw a lot of emotion from people's faces by watching that video. Some people didn't agree with it. I saw people shaking their heads. And it was a slap in the face to the Black community. And I just felt like whoever that guy was, he was despicable. I have no good words to say because if he really cared for the Black community and he really put respect on the George Floyd Memorial site, then he should have made sure that he reached out to somewhere where that money could have helped the property taxes, small businesses in that community that lost revenue. He could have looked out for people who pay their rent. Like, he could have did so much, much more than what he did. But instead, he slapped the Black community in their face all over again. It was like we were back in trial. It was sad. The media and the people who are killing the Black community, they're lynching people on TV in front of millions of people to see, for the world to see.
And just know, if we're not putting Mayor Jacob Fry, Andrew Jenkins, Alondra Cano, and all the city council members on the defense, then expect our communities to stay on the defense. Nico from Unicorn Riot did get a good interview with council member Jeremiah Ellison. He was at George Floyd Square after the verdict was announced. He said, "I think for most of us, the greatest tragedy that happened last summer was the murder of George Floyd. I think for other folks in leadership, the greatest tragedy that happened was the 3rd precinct burnt down. Folks in the governor's office, folks in the mayor's office think the community is the problem. They think it's a bunch of rabid activists with no impulse control." I'll leave a link to that in the description. I'll have more analysis on the Derek Chauvin murder trial. We still have 3 more police going on trial in August. There's still a lot of questions unanswered, so look for that in upcoming episodes. And before we go, make sure you check out what's happening in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, with the murder of Andrew Browne and the cover-up by the Sheriff's Department, as well as the prosecuting attorney. I'll leave a link in the description to Democracy Now!, who's been covering it. Today, a judge denied the media's request to see the body cam. So there's clearly a cover-up happening. North Carolina, there's been protests nonstop, so make sure you're paying attention. Also, please take a look into the case of Ahmed Badal. He was murdered on April 12th here in Minneapolis, just hours after Brooklyn Center Police, Kim Potter, murdered Dante Wright. And if you can donate, please donate to the family. I'll leave a link to the fundraiser page. On the GoFundMe page, it says, the family of Ahmed Badal asked me to start this GoFundMe and to share the details of his unthinkable tragedy and mishandling of the response and case investigation into the murders. Ahmed Badal, 35-year-old husband and father of 5 children, soon to be 6, was shot and murdered the early morning hours of April 12, 2021, almost 12 hours after the murder of Dante Wright, while driving Lyft. There has been controversy around his sudden death and concern about police involvement. The family was not notified by authorities about Ahmed's murder and had to find him themselves by searching local hospitals. The initial investigator of the murder case, who was white, was unresponsive to the family and was taken off the case. Almost 2 weeks after Ahmad's murder, the family has been put in touch with a new investigator who is black, and they were able to meet with him a few days after he was assigned to the case. But he unfortunately did not provide the family with anything they didn't already know, that Ahmad's car was crashed into by a fleeing robbery suspect, and whoever was chasing the robbery suspects then shot at them and shot and killed Ahmed in the crossfire. The family pointedly asked the investigator if it was police chasing and shooting at the robbery suspects, and the investigator said that he could not confirm or deny police involvement. The murder scene was cleared very quickly, and not all bystander witnesses were interviewed. The family is considering hiring their own private investigator. The burden of all of this on the family is overwhelming. Ahmed was not only a caring and attentive father, but he was also the sole breadwinner for the family. He was a full-time truck driver and worked Lyft during his off hours. His wife is due with their 6th child any day and is struggling now to figure out how she is going to make ends meet for their young, beautiful family. Please help the family find answers and accountability, a way forward in the hardest of times, and show them that they live in a community that loves and supports them. Friends of the family are trying to raise $20,000 for Ahmed Badal's widow and soon-to-be 6 children. And I've been looking into this story. Look for a full episode of the People Power podcast dedicated to the murder of Ahmed Badal, as well as Jaden Blackman, who was murdered the same night. The family of Badal believes that Blackman was a passenger in his Lyft in the back seat, but this has not yet been confirmed. And the media's coverage of this story has been nothing short of irresponsible, running with the cops' official narrative that these were just people in the neighborhood shooting at each other. None of that makes sense, and it's making it harder to find the truth. We'll be back soon with episode 7. So much to discuss, so much news happening, so much people power. And as always, all power to the people who organize. Peace.